Hey there, welcome back to the episode of the B2B Marketing Asia podcast. I'm your host, Joe Escobedo. Joining me today is David Tang, who is a channel sales director at Microsoft. Today is a topic which you mentioned you are extremely passionate about, and I am as well too. It's around social selling. And because you have such rich experience, we're going to skip the 101 and we're going to dive into some of the things that maybe some of the folks are doing or maybe are not doing when it comes to social selling.
Lots of people use the free version of LinkedIn for social selling itself. There are many ways to do social selling. The key thing is that the online element has to be taken slowly, step by step, for it to be effective. And then there's one thing that's usually missing. We have this online virtual conversation, sometimes with people we don't know and we connected to, but we don't take it offline. Taking it offline is very important because it solidifies the relationship. Now, in LinkedIn, I use the Sales Navigator Premium Edition. And within Microsoft, we are able to save accounts so that it monitors every single profile that is connected to an account. So let's say the account is a name of a customer for us. And what I do look for every few days is I want to see who has posted in the last 30 days. So what this does for us, saving an account, I'm able to see all the individuals who work in that customer space that have posted on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. And I go drill right into what they've posted on. And sometimes if I do want to get connected with them in the near future, I post a comment, I talk about it. And if it's related to technology in the field that we are focused on, I post a comment about how Microsoft may be doing it. And I'm supportive of that message so that later on, when I do a connection request or I follow up, they would know that I have commented or gave them a like earlier.
Okay. So you said step one is to set up or follow the account in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, look at who has been posting in the past 30 days. If it's someone you want to connect with and you would like, comment on their post and maybe share a little bit more about what you're doing at your organization. Is that right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess the question is there any tips in terms of like comments? It should be like the simple great job, or you mentioned talking about some of the stuff you're doing. What are some of the do's and don'ts when you talk about commenting in people's posts?
In general, if the connection is not known to me and has never accepted my request before, I would comment a positive an observation, for example. And if they're talking about security is tough, I would say, yeah, security is tough. This is how we have done some of these. But I actually mentioned the organization I'm with. It's just to see whether there is a response or reply. And on other times, if someone posted, for example, they have been seeing high productivity from deploying an application or using a certain technology, I would say, fantastic. We have been doing this too for some time. Would you be interested to know more? And at that point of time, I'm asking for permission if I'm able to share a little bit more because I don't want to go right into it and say, hey, Microsoft have done this. So there are two ways to go about having a cold or a warm approach to posting a comment. If you go directly in and you post an outright statement that looks like you're trying to sell my product, I guarantee you it's going to have a negative response. And the people who are observing the comments field, they know that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very obvious when you're pushing your products or services. Now, at what point you mentioned you start engaging with their content? At what point do you send that LinkedIn?
The key thing is there must be some form of connection. And there are various ways to do it. One of the best ways that I like is I join groups that I'm affiliated with, associated, or I like to be a part of. And within these groups, you will notice that as long as you're a member of the group, any member of that same group, you're able to send them a LinkedIn message that is not in mail. It's because you are already connected to them via the group. And making an introduction to say, I would like to get connected with you because you're part of the same group. It builds an association, which is an assumed agreement because we are both part of the same group. That is one of the shortcuts that I would go about doing my connection requests.
Yeah, no, it's a very smart hack because, like you said, you can bypass that original kind of in-mail thing. And to your point, it looks a bit more organic because you mentioned the bond that you guys are in the same group, for example. I'd love to hear what are some of the other ways in which you maybe use bonds to facilitate that original conversation.
There's a hidden secret that almost nobody has heard of, and I use it all the time. In LinkedIn, there are events that are run by others. And in general, joining an event also allow you to message everyone who has signed up for an event. They don't even need to have attended the event itself. You could ping all the people that have registered for that event, and you can ask them one-to-one, would you like to connect with? Now, this little known secret, I leverage with a twist. What I do is I register for events that have, let's say, a very competitive approach. So if my competitor is running an event, because I want to know who attends their event, which might be a prospective customer of mine. And in some cases, I've managed to find individuals who are influencers or decision attended my competitors' events, and I'm able to reach them one-to-one just to find out how did they like the event, what interested them the most. And oftentimes, I would discover that the event organizer themselves have not yet done the follow-up after the event is over. And I'm the first one from the competition, doing the
Yeah.
It's real cool.
That's absolutely brilliant. And I knew once again, I've been using it for LinkedIn for years, but you taught me something new today that I didn't know you can message people attending the same event. So if people are listening, you're talking about LinkedIn events, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So you mentioned you ping them directly, particularly if they're competitors. So it's a competitor event. You register for that, and then you can go ahead and ping people and say, hey, what do you think about this topic? Or because, like you said, you're first to connect with them, you get that connection before maybe your competitor does. So I think that's actually a very clever hack that I'm definitely going to try right after this. So I appreciate you sharing.
Cool.
Al, I'm sure you have tons of others. Is there any other kind of things that maybe not many folks are trying or have thought about that you guys are implementing? I think you've already guys given some great ones already.
That's something else that I have in LinkedIn Sales Navigator that is not often used at all. It is if a contact has been in the news in the last 30 days. And being in the news means that LinkedIn's algorithm is able to comb, let's Forbes or Fortune.com and match the individual together with their job title. Because in general, when you have a online media publication, and if someone gave them a quote, they will publish both the full name, the first name and the last name, as well as their job title and the organization that they are with. The LinkedIn algorithm is able to identify or do a fuzzy match. It's good enough. It's really good, actually. Every single one that I've clicked on, and it goes to the news, and then you look at it and it matches to the LinkedIn profile. Having reached out to someone who has recently been quoted in an online media publication is extremely useful as a feature, because not all the time are we 24/7 following a company so that we get all the news. But being able to be notified by LinkedIn that someone has been quoted in the news and it's someone that I want to get connected to, giving them a comment about their views or their quotes that they publish and aligning what we do and maybe a fit to what they want is a good way to initiate a discussion or an in-mail conversation with the contact itself.
Yeah, I think it's a great way. Like I said, everyone likes to be acknowledged for the work they put out. So that's a great tip. There's two things that I want to ask you, one of which is around when people start a new company. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this. Some people have said that the best time to message them is when they just start a new company because maybe they're looking for a new partner, a new vendor, or things like that. Do you find that's helpful in terms of like connecting with people when they first start a job? And if so, the follow-up question is, what do you send them beyond the, hey, congratulations, congrats on the new job kind of thing?
I think one of the things that I do when I receive a congratulations message when I change or get into a new role is when I reply, I don't just say thank you. I actually talk about what I'm doing in this new role. And if it's related to the person who is congratulating me, I would ask for anything that they think they could do to leverage what I am currently responsible for in my area of influence. And that's why when I say thank you, or when I go for people who have just changed roles, I normally try to think of, is there some additional question that I can ask them to pique their interest, to give me a response so that we start a conversation? Because if you just like, or you just say congratulations, it's over. But in a new role change, sometimes you look at the comments that the guy who just changed the role replies certain comments and not everybody else. And in general, it's because the comment is pointed. It's like a leading question or statement, and they want to respond to you. That's starting a discussion. In LinkedIn, this thing is called activity, and activity trumps likes as well as comments. Activity meaning someone posts a comment and there's a reply, and that starts the activity cycle. And if the activity is high enough, not only do you get the benefit of increasing your social selling index, however, the point is, when someone has responded, a lot of people can see question and the answer. And it also teaches them that both of them, or at least teaches everybody reading it, what their interests are in each other.
That is another brilliant hack that I hadn't thought about, because that's the thing that's always mind-boggling to me. How do you congratulate someone? How do you start the conversation? So your point was, look at the questions they're getting and look at how they're responding. If they're responding, then that gives you good insights in terms of how you can maybe spark a conversation with them.
Absolutely.
Ah, I love it. There's so many practical tips already. Awesome. Now, one thing I'd love to ask you is, because people always ask me, let's say that someone is not active on LinkedIn. Maybe they haven't posted in the last 30 or 90 days. Is it still worth connecting with them, or what different approach would you take?
I think there are two minds to this. There's the shortcut to talking about connecting with someone who will be active on LinkedIn just by checking out their activity first and seeing whether they've posted recently. Whether they have articles is another reason. Whether they've uploaded documents is another reason. However, the question of whether I should connect with someone who literally has no activity at all has to do with whether they have been updating their LinkedIn profile. If their LinkedIn profile has been updated, and although they have not been active on LinkedIn, it does at least tell me they're using LinkedIn for a certain reason. What that reason is, I don't know yet, but they are keeping their profile active on LinkedIn. So there might be a reason why you should connect to them. And it's very easy to test. If you connect to someone who has zero activity and that person accepts the connection, it at least tells me they're active. And in the past, or actually whether the feature is still around today in the free version of LinkedIn, I'm not sure. However, what I would be interested to know is when I send out a connection request, I'm also able to withdraw a connection request. So when I send out a connection request to someone who has no activity, if that request is still there pending in the last, let's say 60 days, I would withdraw that request, because I know not only is the individual not active on LinkedIn, it's also an individual who is not accepting connection requests. But in general, I also follow the shortcut approach, which is if there was no activity, in general, I do not connect with that individual.
Okay, that's interesting, because there's a lot of folks who are very active like you and I, but then there's a lot of folks who are just lurkers, meaning that they get on the profile, but then they don't post anything. So, that's interesting as well too. Like, you focus on the shortcut because, like you said, people are active. They're probably more inclined to start a conversation versus someone who maybe hasn't posted anything. You said bare minimum, like you said, they should at least have their profile updated, which I know some folks haven't updated their profile in years. So I think it's another practical takeaway for the audience so far.
Cool. What's
Um,
next?
So the other thing is around relationships and leveraging second, like, introductions and referrals. Is that something you recommend from people? If so, how do you go about, what's your approach for doing that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In Sales Navigator, we have this feature known as Team Link, and you could see who else is connected to this individual that is at the first level. And you can reach out to them and say, do you know this individual? I would like to get connected to them. Can you help me out? and start a three-way conversation. When I am the target that's being asked whether I know an individual, like, can I do a three-way connection? I call it a Y connector. And it's extremely important that I say yes all the time and go for it. Recently, for example, someone in my affiliated organization asked, hey, do you know this individual? Can you connect me to him? And I noticed that this request is for business in another country. And although I did not know the target, we were connected at the first level. So I went to the profile and I noticed that in the last 14 days, the individual came back to Singapore from visiting his home country. And that was the country that the individual who asked me to make an introduction to that they're interested in. So I wrote the three-way LinkedIn mail and I said, with guts, I'm going to introduce you to this individual who's interested in building a business in your country. And I noticed you just recently came back, so you might have fresh insights. Well, we're all on lockdown and a lot of us aren't able to travel. Would you be interested to help her out? And he replied immediately. And he said, yeah, sure, why not? Because he is active on LinkedIn because he posted he just came back from a visit. And the other thing was asking for permission to get an email to set up a calendar appointment. That is a hot button. If that ask is affirmative, and this individual, he did reply with his email saying, sure, send the calendar appointment to my email. That's when I know that the warm introduction has been successful. But the key important thing is the virtual connections that I've made in the past do result or can result in a future prospect or future deal for someone else. So always be willing to do that simply because I want it to be reciprocated when I ask similarly to be introduced to someone else.
Yeah, it's a give and take of where essentially you're constantly giving, introducing other people. You obviously would hope that they would do the same for you. So I think it works out that way. Now, another thing I want to talk about is at the very early portion, you talked about taking the conversation offline. You talked about some of the triggers. You talked about messaging. At what point do you say, take the conversation offline?
I think as soon as there is interest, online interest, although virtual, tells a story about, usually it's facts. You're trying to convince them of something. However, to compel them to do something, it's not as easy as just sending facts like white papers, like videos or demonstrations of a product or statistics that we know of and they want to find out. Because if you can't compel them to do a face-to-face or at least do a video conference one-to-one, it tells you that they are not ready yet. And in order to move the conversation along, we need to get them to be compelled enough to have that one-on-one. Now, in certain cases, if the product or the service or the offer that I'm making can be completed entirely online where no user intervention, no human interface is necessary, it could work. However, I do not recommend it. I do think that having the warm one-to-one connection, whether it's a face-to-face meeting or whether it's going to be a video conference like this, it's going to be a whole lot more effective. Let me explain to you why. Okay. There may be a way for you to leverage others because when it comes to online, you're able to reach the people that follow you, your friends, your fans, and your connections. So the friends, fans, connections, and the people who follow your primary audience, because that's my target audience. But you're also able to reach someone else, friends, fans, friends, connections, as well as followers, if they are willing to open that up to you. And if you want to be able to reach them too, at the same time, you must be open to at least having a connection that is warm enough. And usually it takes an offline activity. Now, in the case where I had some very successful P marketers, we have partners who are in the online marketing space, and we got them to do connections on LinkedIn with decision makers and influencers in Singapore. Now, in this aspect, we had an individual that came up with a best practice, and this was really a fantastic best practice. It's like, I've never heard of it. And when we saw the results, we were blown out of our minds. First, the results. This individual was able to have almost 900 offline conversations, one-to-one, face-to-face. And the simple question that she asked was, I noticed that you are an expert in this area and your experience spans 20, 30 years. Would you mind sharing with me what's your motivations for success and whether you would meet me over early morning breakfast, coffee or tea? And usually people who are highly successful in senior positions, they are open to meet before or actually after office hours. And at the same time, if you flatter them just a little bit in terms of their experience or their expertise, a lot of times they're open to having the meeting. And it's a way to open a door, but 900 doors open for that one individual is a huge ROI. And those were all offline conversations that accelerated. In some of the screenshots that it was questioned, and then the answer was, here's my email address, here's my mobile phone number. That was how fast it was. General managers, CEOs, C-levels responding in that way. It tells me not only is there no gatekeeper, a secretary or an executive assistant reading their emails, but the profiled individual is responding to their own LinkedIn messages. So this is one very good reason why we should or we can actually have an offline meeting.
There's so many good insights in that. I want to reshare some of the things you talked about. So she mentioned that she reached out to some of the senior executives like CEOs, general managers, and she looked at their profile and made the comment of, hey, I noticed you have maybe 20 years experience. You're an expert in blank. So I'd love to find out more about your motivations and experience. So more of a, like you said, complimenting their experience, what they've done, and then having the conversation around them. What are some of their learnings? What are some of their experiences? And then scheduling that during coffee or breakfast. So essentially, like you said, before or after the usual working hours. Is that right?
Absolutely. There's a kicker to it though. During that actual offline meeting, you seriously cannot sell anything. You're not going to talk about what you do unless you've been asked. And you really genuinely have to be interested and invest your time in listening to that individual, because the question was you're interested to hear more about their success. So the second they feel or they have a perception that you are genuinely not interested, you just want to go for fishing or get a lead out of them, these guys are smart enough to figure it out because they're C-level executives in the first place. Be genuine and sincere about it, but you do build lifelong friends that way, offline.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to your entire process you've been sharing so far. Like even looking at people if they've been in the news, commenting on whether they're doing a good job, taking an interest in them as much as possible, even in, like you said, the offline meetings. And then that way you're able to facilitate some relationship. Even if somebody doesn't close that, like you said, you get to know someone new, maybe they'll introduce you or vice versa. But at least you're kickstarting that conversation, which I think is fundamental to social selling, something I always preach as well too. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, one more thing I want to talk about, because we talked a lot about outreach. I'm curious, we flipped the script a little bit and we talk about inbound and creating content. How important really is creating content for social selling?
I guess if you view it as wanting to be recognized for something, you have to at least share what you, whether it's a little bit or it's a lot. If you don't share first, you're not going to attract people to share with you. And if you're able to take that first action and people recognize you for it, and remember, Google, you search for information, but on LinkedIn, you're searching for people. In order for people to be found, if you're not sharing your own content, which is LinkedIn articles, and publishing it on LinkedIn articles, you don't have enough keywords for people to find you on LinkedIn. And having those keywords around the expertise that you've built is important. Here's one reason why. I typically look at profiles that have a huge following. So anyone that is above 30,000, which is the maximum number of connections that you can have, that has followers, tells me that it's worthwhile listening to what they say. And let's say the content they publish or the comments that they post are valuable, and you see there's a ton of likes and there are a few comments on it. Taking one additional step, instead of commenting or liking it immediately, for someone with a very large following, above 30,000 followers, I ping them and ask them, I've read your post. This is the topic. I like it very much. Would you mind if I shared it? Now, it's an oxymoron because you can share anybody's content that shows up on your timeline. And if you find it on LinkedIn, you can literally just share the content. So why do this? Because I want the individual with a large following to know that I've asked for permission to share their content. So it registers on your mind that I've asked. And in general, because you want your post to be seen by a lot more people, they would say, yes, go ahead, by all means. The question mark is, why not? So yes, go ahead, share the content. Fantastic, boom. But let's say, why am I doing it? A few weeks later, a few months later, when I have content that I want to leverage someone with a following that has more than 30,000 followers that will help my content go trending on LinkedIn, I'm going to post it and I'm going to reach out to that same individual and say, hey, I published recently this article, or I've recently done this post. It's along the same lines of what you're saying, and I'm giving my own insights on this. Would you mind sharing it with your connections? Invariably, which is 99% of the time, they say yes. So it's not so much about whether you have to create content. It's whether you want your content to be noticed and whether you want to share your content. So the intention is important. Important. If you are not intending to have to be known on LinkedIn for anything, then maybe you don't need to create content of your own. But if you want to be known for something, your expertise or your experience, creating content is one of the best ways to be known. The story I shared is the best way for you to be known virally.
Once again, now you're dropping some influencer marketing / hacks in here too. So once again, all these things are something I have not tried out. And you got me thinking as well too, because people always ask me, how do I come up with ideas? Now, obviously there's tools and you can check with your clients and prospects and so on. But you give me another idea when you're talking about looking at maybe people who have big followings, see what they're posting, see what's working, and then creating something that's similar, obviously with your own take, can be a way to shortcut that process of, hey, what do I think about? So once again, something I hadn't thought about either. So I'm definitely going to try that out for sure.
Fantastic. Glad to help any way I can. Ask more questions to get more.
Absolutely. A couple more for you. I want to circle back when we talk about triggers, because I think triggers is something that is a big thing with a lot of sales folks and outreach. You talked about, has someone joined a new job, whether they've been featured in the news, whether they've posted in the past 30 days. Are there any other specific triggers that you look for when you start messaging folks?
I also look for people who have viewed my profile. And it's important because people have viewed my profile and didn't proceed to ask for a connection request, which is the natural progression. I want to know why they looked at my profile. I typically send a message that I keep in a template and says, thanks for viewing my profile. What interested you in the first place? And is there anything I can do to help? And sometimes I get a response and they would say, I viewed your profile because it's in the same job and I saw it being recommended. So I clicked on it. And I would offer my expertise, my knowledge, basically. I would say, if there's something that you want to ask me about what I know, go right ahead. If I know the answer, I'll give you the rest. And this is one way to identify people that I want to be connected with. I will tell you why. If they were interested in my profile, there must be something in it that they were looking for in other people, or maybe me, myself. But if they never proceeded to make a connection request, sometimes it's because I'm not relevant enough, meaning that I don't fit to a T what they're looking for. But I'm not looking for 100%. I'm looking for maybe 50% in terms of knowledge or skills gap. That perception of what I show up to other people on LinkedIn is the gap that I want to narrow. And in order to narrow the gap, I need to understand why an individual viewed but didn't proceed to connect with me. And I may find and discover for myself what's missing. Let me tell you what was missing. A long time ago, what was missing is this strange thing about skills on the LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn has a set of skills that you can use, and there's a free field that you can type. All right. Social selling was not one of the pre-existing skills that LinkedIn has. So you need to type it in, right? Now, social selling was what I wanted to be known for, but I never put that skill up for endorsement simply because LinkedIn didn't have it in pre-existing list. But an individual said, I was looking for a social seller. You seem to know your stuff. However, I don't see social selling as a skill on your profile. That was when it hit me and said, boom, that's what I was missing. And I put that there, and I asked for endorsements whenever I do a social selling activity. And invariably, we boosted it up to 99 plus. And it's also very important to me that when I found that out, not only is 99 plus good, but there's something better than having more than 99 people endorse me for a skill. It's someone who is also 99 plus in social selling endorsing me for the skill, because directly underneath, you would see Tim Hughes, who is also highly skilled in this area, has endorsed you. It matters a lot that people endorse me for a skill, but it is a whole lot more influential if someone who has also been endorsed more than 99 times also endorsed me for the same skill. And even more so when it's a skill not on the pre-existing LinkedIn list. It's something that you type in free form. And there are really not many that are skilled with social selling.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great tip, not only in terms of credibility, but also in terms of what you're talking about keywords and searchability. Now, David, I could talk to you all day. I'll just ask you one final question. You talked about Sales Navigator in terms of tools, or any other tools that you find helpful in terms of your social selling or sales outreach?
I like this tool that I used in the past. Okay, it is Sociable. And Sociable is something that you can subscribe to online. But what it does for me was it curated all the content that I'm following that I want to be known for. And it allows me to schedule a post from this content. And it was useful because Microsoft used it officially for a number of years to curate our own content so that we can easily schedule and post it to our connections. However, today we're using a brand new tool. Okay. But that brand new tool is unique to us. It's on LinkedIn. It's known as My Company. So any organization that has the LinkedIn Premium Edition can set up a My Company page and use that. However, if you want something that you can use that is not something that your company is exclusive to, Sociable is a great tool. I used it. I got my P marketers to use it. A lot of folks that were using was finding it valuable because it shortcuts looking for interesting topics that is pre-curated by someone else that is affiliated to what we do, and we can immediately schedule and send it out.
Awesome. I'll definitely have to check that out. Appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for watching and listening to today's episode. Feel free to definitely follow David on LinkedIn and wherever he's on social. And guys, feel free to share today's episode. So many key learnings. So thank you guys so much.